All right, quick break. Knock, knock. Who's there? Amazon Music. Amazon Music who? Amazon Music, where Prime members can listen to top comedy podcasts ad-free. No awkward interruptions, just nonstop laughs from your favorite shows. It's free, it's funny, and hey, it's better than my knock-knock jokes. Download the Amazon Music app and let the good times roll. Or go to amazon.com/ad-free comedy. That's amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. In today's solo episode, we're exploring overwhelm, what it is, how we experience it, and specifically digging into the 6 archetypes of overwhelm so that we can start to see and name this pattern that shows up in our individual lives and how we can start to respond differently so that we can go from a state of overwhelm to one where we feel more present and empowered. It's hard to not feel overwhelmed in this modern day age, not only because we are constantly bombarded with a really horrific news cycle of everything that's happening locally and globally, but we're also constantly being saturated with information, and it expands outside of like what our human brains and bodies were designed for. So we're in an inflection point in evolution where our systems can't keep up with the type of stimuli that we are surrounded by. And who knows what it will look like in the future. But right now, I am here to tell you, somebody who's worked with people for over a decade, it is a lot. It's a lot to be human in this day and age. And so we need resources, we need tools, and that is what you are going to gain from today's episode. So I hope you settle in wherever you are listening to this podcast, and let's get centered. Just yesterday, I was in the kitchen and I was trying to defrost some chicken, and I needed a bowl from the cabinet in order to put it in the sink to defrost the chicken. And I'm rushing of like, oh fuck, I forgot to do this earlier in the day. And I'm trying to get back to my desk to get some work done, to prepare for some calls. And I'm trying to get these metal bowls apart and they're stuck. Has it ever happened to you where you have stacked bowls and they are so well stacked that they're not coming apart easily? And so I'm standing there and my frustration is building and my overwhelm is building because I feel the clock ticking and I'm trying to get everything done and trying to take care of it all. And I just felt this tension bubble rise in my torso and my shoulders and my jaw. And I almost just wanted to scream in that moment over fucking taking a bowl apart. And I laughed at myself in that moment because I recognized, oh, wait, you're feeling overwhelmed right now. And you're trying to over control the situation. And it was such a funny moment because I got to see my overwhelm pattern of the controller show up and got to watch it. And it was a choice point of I can let the controller continue to control me, or I can rest back into the moment and trust that just softening as I am already feeling my body tense, trying to rip this bowl apart, just softening and staying patient with the process is going to serve me better. And once I rested back, once I kind of let go of that control of needing to do it quickly and rush through it and fit my time perfectly, I felt so much more ease in my body. Again, it was comical. I was like laughing at myself, not like making fun of myself, but like lovingly laughing at this pattern. And I got the bowls apart and I put the chicken in the bowl and I put the cold water in the bowl to defrost the chicken. And I washed my hands and I head back to my desk. And there is a simple example of how overwhelm can show up in these micro moments in our day and how we can learn to be with ourselves in a more empowering way. I'm really excited to talk to you about overwhelm and specifically these 6 different types of overwhelm, these archetypes that I have been able to track with my clients, with myself over the last 10 plus years of working with individuals. And from this place, I've created a quiz that's really fun to take. There's only about 7 questions. It takes less than 2 minutes. And you can determine what your typical overwhelm pattern is. And I just want to highlight that I think we have all of them in us, and yet at different points in our life or with whatever pattern we might needing to be working on in the moment in our life, that will be the main overwhelm character. So for me, I definitely can notice all of the 6 in me, but I will say that the controller overwhelm is definitely the main go-to and how I respond and have a relationship with overwhelm. And so knowing that, again, gives me information, and what we know about information and why we love strengthening our mindfulness muscles here on the Center of the City podcast is because when we get to pay attention with curiosity and kindness to our life, to our body, to our thoughts, to others, we get to learn and we gather information. And that information becomes wisdom, it becomes insight that we can then integrate into our life. So these overwhelm patterns are archetypes, and I want you to see them as not something bad, like, oh, I have this like bad bitch part of me that shows up when I get stressed and overwhelmed, but instead it's a pattern and it comes from a place. And so when we get to name the overwhelm pattern, it supports us taming it. It supports us meeting that pattern with more curiosity, with more awareness, so that we can start to, shift some things in our life and maybe respond differently to the overwhelm. I want to be clear here. I'm using overwhelm and stress as synonyms, and they are similar, but also very different. So stress is our body's response to a perceived threat or challenge in life, right? When we get stressed based on a stimuli or something that's happening in our environment, our body goes into its stress reaction. And we're going to talk about that in more detail in a few moments. But then overwhelm highlights a little bit more of the state, the emotional and cognitive overload that happens in our brains and our bodies when we are in stress, when we are experiencing stress, or even when stress exceeds just our capacity to cope, when it feels too overwhelming, right? We feel too overloaded, we're too saturated, we're might even feel like we're kind of drowning a little bit in the stress, in the like our system doesn't know how to respond. When we think about stress, there's 2 types of stress. There's eustress, which is known as good stress, positive stress. It's kind of energizing. Maybe that's, getting a new job and all of the things, the kind of stretchy things that can come with that. Or it might be getting married or having a baby. So they might be like really beautiful, positive things that are happening in life, but they're also really stressful. And we can experience overwhelm even when we're experiencing good stress, positive stress. And then there's distress, which is unpleasant stress, that might be dealing with something that's really hard, like financial insecurity or a chronic health issue or conflict in a relationship or work burnout. And of course, distress can create a lot of overwhelm for the system. It reduces performance. It can create a shutdown. Distress can be chronic or short-term stress, more acute stress, depending on what it might be. Now, we all have different emotional and behavioral responses to stress and overwhelm, how we cope with it. But what happens inside the brain and the body is typically similar. And so when we experience stress, that triggers the amygdala, the fear center in our brain. And that then sends signals to our nervous system to get ready, to get into fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. It's an opportunity for our body to respond, right? To protect ourselves. And we want to remind ourselves, because I think like stress has a really negative connotation. Like when our body's stressed, that is a bad thing. And I want to make sure we're not shaming ourselves, because stress isn't bad. It's not inherently bad. However, in this modern day age we're living in, we're constantly now being stressed. And I say we as in the general population. It's like, I think Gallup's report was like over 51% of employees are experiencing stress daily. And because we're experiencing stress on a different spectrum daily, it can be then too much for our systems. It becomes too overwhelming. So again, the body's doing its natural response to protect us, to keep us in survival. But if we're feeling like every moment of every day or a majority of the day, we are going into stress states and we don't have skills or resources how to get out of it, that can end up being too much for our systems and can have inverse effects on our brains and our bodies. So for instance, when we then have our body or nervous system go into its sympathetic activation and it gets ready to get into a hyper-aroused state or a hypo-aroused state, what then happens is we have hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flow through our body, right? Gearing the body up, supporting our body. But if the body is experiencing constant inflammation of these hormones, that then creates constant inflammation in the body. And that can affect our gut. I have a lot of clients that experience gut issues because of how much tension gets stored there and inflammation. It can create a lot of muscle tension and tightness. And it can then, of course, affect people's sleep, right? If we're constantly activated in an inflamed state with too much adrenaline and cortisol in our body, that can throw us off. And over time, if that happens, it can weaken our immune system. And, we even can go back to the brain for a moment, and that when we are experiencing constant stress and not having ways of how to manage it, it will also drain the blood from our prefrontal cortex, which is a really important part of our brain that we want and need to think clearly, to be creative, to have more executive functioning there. And so when we're constantly stressed, we actually can't think clearly. I know this can be really frustrating for a lot of my clients, because sometimes they'll come to a session already so stressed and in a hyperactivated state, but they just want clarity. They just want to know what's the right next step. And a lot of the time, our work is even just regulating their nervous system to come back to baseline, to come back to a parasympathetic state, so that they then have access to clarity. Because a lot of the time, we think we can just think our way through our stress, or push our way through the stress. And we'll talk about that in a few moments with the archetypes. But when that happens, that's actually sometimes not even possible because that wiring internally is not available yet. A little side story. Years ago, I was working at a workplace well-being center as a life coach and supporting their employees, managing their health, their well-being. And the root of what we were doing, I was on a team with one other coach and a nutritionist and an Ayurvedic specialist and a physical trainer and massage therapist and a chiropractic doctor. So we were this holistic team, and what we were working on, the root of it all was stress, because the root cause of most of the diseases that we have in this modern day world are tied to stress and inflammation of the body on a cellular level. And this work of helping people manage stress really runs deep for me because I, as a young child, before I had cancer in my own journey, I would see my mother, this powerhouse businesswoman, do it all, be so stressed. And I watched how stress ate her alive. I strongly believe it's one of the reasons that she got cancer. She had leukemia. And I believe stress is also one of the triggers that probably triggered something in my system to give me cancer at the age of 21. And so we live in this modern day world where we're not, monks hiding in a mountaintop and living life away from society and away from capitalism. We are human beings in this modern day world, living lives in busy cities, full cities, competitive cities, expensive cities, connected and tapped into the internet and all of the endless information and AI connections that are out there in this modern world. And so there's just a lot going on that we as humans, not even from that information overload, we can even think of like an environmental impact and pollution and all the chemicals and plastic and right in our food system. And there's so many, like when we really think about it, it gets overwhelming. But all of this just to paint this picture of it is so easy for us to get stressed. And I want to be a resource and a stand for you, for me, for your loved ones, for my loved ones, to remind ourselves that we can proactively have a healthier relationship with stress, because we can't make it disappear unless we want to go hide away in the mountains. If we want to live our lives in the city, so to say, in our busy modern day lives, we have to have a healthier relationship. And that can look like many different things for many different people. I don't think there's one size that fits all for how you experience stress. But that's one of the gifts of this Overwhelm Archetype quiz, is I did want to support you with some way to map your own patterns with stress so that you can start to be in relationship to stress in a healthier way. So let's break down these archetypes together, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about the archetype, what they experience, some of the patterns. Some of it might resonate for you, some of it might not. I really encourage you to head on over to wadebrill.com/quiz and take this free quiz. Again, it will take you less than 2 minutes. You'll get your results, as well as you will get a specific resource, mindfulness resource, to support you navigating and being with that overwhelm pattern in a more helpful way. So let's break down these 6 archetypes in no particular order. And again, you might hear that like all of them resonate in different ways. And I just want you to know that's normal. And you definitely have one that is the leader right now. So if you want to find out that one, head on over to wadebrill.com/quiz or click on the show notes. So the first archetype is what I call the pusher. This is somebody whose behavior is all about striving, hustling, can't rest, won't stop, pushes to the end, push through, power through, doesn't like to accept. They might have some fears of, if I stop, if I slow down, if I take a break, I'll be lazy, or I'll fall behind, or I'll be irrelevant. And most of the time here, the pusher pattern is this deep need for worthiness. Like the more I do, the more worth I have, or my worth is tied to how much I get done. And yet there's a desire for like deep peace, like knowing that they are enough just as they are. And the next archetype is the overgiver. And specifically, we say overgiver because giving is a beautiful thing. But the overgiver is somebody who tends to think of others before they think of themselves, and not in the selfless kind of way, but in the sense of at the expense of, right? They tend to put other people's needs, wants, behaviors, desires ahead of even just thinking what they need or what they want, right? They're not putting their oxygen mask on. They're putting somebody else's on before theirs. And there might be a deeper fear here for this type of person who experiences the overgiver, where it's like, if I don't show up for everybody I love, if I'm not being the person that cares for everybody, then I'll somehow be abandoned or unloved or rejected. There might be a deeper need here for the overgiver to be seen, to know that they're worthy, to know that they're supported, that they don't have to do anything in order to receive that support. They may also have a need for safety, like, oh, I am safe without pleasing everybody or doing the things for everybody. I am safe just as I am. I am accepted. The next archetype is the avoider. And the avoider is pretty much in the name. It's somebody who tends to procrastinate when they get overwhelmed, maybe numbs out, scrolls a lot, shuts down, distracts themselves, escapes responsibility. Maybe they have this fear of like, I'm going to fail or disappoint, so I'm just going to hide. I'm not ready to face anything. A lot of the time, the avoider avoids because their emotions or what they're experiencing is too overwhelming for their system, that it just feels safer to kind of push away or pretend it's not there. And so there typically is a need for some tools of how to meet their emotions, how to face their emotions with kindness, with care. They have a need to feel emotionally safe, to feel connection. If you're watching, this is, a little side silly thing, but if you're watching The Summer I Turned Pretty, the most recent season, actually I would say he showed up this way in all seasons. Conrad definitely has the avoider pattern when it comes to overwhelm, right? He kind of shuts down, pulls in, withdraws, and doesn't really face and name what's present for him. Then there's the drifter, and the drifter is somebody who really cares about having meaning and direction and purpose in life. But when they're feeling overwhelmed, it's kind of hard to know, like, where do they put their attention and focus, and they start to feel off balance. And they're really looking for deeper alignment. When I think of the drifter, I love this name because they're kind of flowing in the wind, flowing down the stream, but looking for more clarity, wanting to put that energy, funnel that energy somewhere. The next one is the controller. And yep, this is the one I resonate with the most, especially right now. And the controller really comes from a place of wanting to micromanage everything in order to avoid chaos. they have this deep need to feel safe, if there's kind of this thought pattern, like if I let go, everything will fall apart or everything will get ruined. And so when I experience overwhelm, and I think most controllers, when they experience overwhelm, they will start to grip tighter. They'll start to like sink their teeth in deeper, right? Or hold on to plans because they think, okay, if I can control the situation, it's going to work out. And what they really need is also trust, surrender, acceptance. And the last one we'll touch on is the spinner. So the spinner is somebody who tends to overthink, gets really anxious, spirals in analysis paralysis, really trying to make the best and right decisions, can be very much also tied to perfectionism. And so there can be this thought of, if I don't consider every outcome, I'll make the wrong choice, right? So I've got to like really sit there thinking through it all. So the spinner archetype really has this need for trust as well, clarity, self-assurance. So I'm so curious to hear which archetype resonates for you the most. And if you go ahead and do the free quiz, reach out to me on social media at OneWade, or send me a note in the show notes, linked in the show notes, and let me know what archetype you are and what you're learning about yourself, because it really is so juicy. I created this quiz, and when I did it myself, I was like, damn, I'm already learning some other patterns about myself. So when you get your results, you have this opportunity to look at your patterns, and you have an opportunity to now say, okay, I have this overwhelming tendency relationship to the overwhelm, overload, and here's how I can work with this energy. So we can start to shift our response. So for me, right, it's been this place of, okay, I see the controller right here, and what can I do differently? And not just naming the archetype, but when we can even go like layers deeper to understand where those needs are coming from. Like when I get to step back and recognize, wow, in my life, especially at such a young, vulnerable age, so much was happening that I felt unsafe. And in order to feel safe, I felt like I had to control the situation. And so I see that as a default patterning in my system. And so learning how to work with it more skillfully has been very empowering, not only for my own health and well-being and how I experience stress and overwhelm, but also how I navigate it with my partner. I have a client who just did this quiz, and they were the pusher. And it was very interesting because they recognized, oh, here are the ways that I push, not just even from a striving, like I need to get all of this done on my to-do list, but from even an internal dialogue of recognizing how much pressure they push on themselves to get the work done. So by them seeing this pattern and getting some language for their experience and helping them start to understand what's underneath the need to push, how they can try to find more of their self-worth in just being who they are, and how they can learn how to rest into the moment without needing to prove themselves that they'll be accepted and loved just how they are. That's the deeper healing work that I do with my clients, so that we can meet those places and then have more capacity and more awareness to then take the overwhelm that we experience in our modern day life, and instead of having these default pattern reactions, we can actually take that energy and direct it towards something that's going to serve us better. So if you're nodding along to this episode at various points and like, oh yeah, like I do that, or I can feel that, or I can see that, or this comes out in this way, I really welcome you to head on over to wadebrill.com/quiz and take this free quiz, share it with your friends, talk about it. Like, let's talk about and normalize that we get overwhelmed and overloaded, and that there are more skillful ways in this human life that we can be responding to stress, that we don't have to suffer, and that we don't have to suffer alone. And as we start to wind down this episode, I welcome you to pause here and check in with yourself and ask, what would open up in your life, or what would shift in your life if you weren't responding from your overwhelmed default place? What would shift in your life? Feel free to share your takeaways, your insights with me on Instagram, or send a note, again, linked in the show notes on the contact form. I am so excited for you to have access to these resources. And there's more to come, more resources to support you navigating the overwhelm that we feel in life, so that you can come back to an empowered, centered state. So you can come back to yourself, your core self of who you are, without all of the gunk and protective parts of ourself that show up and keep our true essence from shining. Thank you for letting me into your ears, your heart, your mind. It is always such a gift and an honor. Please take a moment to share this episode with a loved one. The word of mouth that all of you do is so helpful. It's helped this podcast grow tremendously, and I couldn't do this work without you. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for showing me that you find these episodes helpful and beneficial in your life. That gives me fuel to keep going, to keep showing up for you. And until next time, stay centered.